The cafe on the corner of Maple Street was the kind of place that smelled like warm cinnamon and rain-soaked mornings. The bell above the door chimed every few seconds as customers came and went, their laughter mingling with the soft hum of jazz playing from an old speaker. Emma sat by the window, tracing the rim of her paper cup nervously. The sky outside was a pale gray, the kind that promised rain but never quite delivered it. She looked at her reflection in the glass, tired eyes, dark circles, and a faint smudge of exhaustion that no makeup could hide. Her scrubs, still faintly wrinkled from her 12-hour shift, made her stand out among the neatly dressed weekend crowd. It had been one of those nights at St. Mary's Hospital, endless emergency calls, the crying family in room 304, and the old man who refused to take his medicine unless she held his hand. By the time her shift ended, Emma could barely stand. Still, she'd showered at the hospital, brushed her hair into something resembling order, and taken a bus straight here. She checked the time again, 2:35 p.m. Her date was supposed to arrive at 2:30. Maybe he was late. Maybe he wasn't coming at all. The thought stung more than she wanted to admit. It had been months since she'd said yes to any kind of date. Lily, her best friend and fellow nurse, had insisted this one was different. He's not one of those app guys, she'd said. He's kind, intelligent, and he specifically asked to be set up with someone real. You'll like him, someone real. Emma almost laughed at the phrase. If real meant perpetually broke, sleep-deprived, and surviving on instant noodles, then sure, she was as real as it got. She opened her purse and sighed. $5. That was all she had until payday on Thursday. Rent was due in 2 days, her mother's medication refill had drained her account, and her old car had finally given up on her. But she wasn't going to cancel the date. She couldn't. She wanted to feel normal, even just for one afternoon. Next in line, the barista called. Emma stood and approached the counter. Just a small caramel latte, please. The barista, a cheerful girl with purple hair, typed it into the register. That'll be $4.75. Emma handed over her last $5 bill, hesitating a moment before saying, keep the change. It wasn't much, but she'd always believed in kindness, even small gestures. Thanks, the barista said with a grin, scribbling Emma across the cup. Emma returned to her seat, wrapping both hands around the warm cup as if it could anchor her. Her heart beat faster now. The thought of meeting a stranger, especially after years of disappointments, filled her with dread and curiosity all at once. She imagined him walking in, confident, maybe in a blazer, someone who smelled faintly of success. And then she thought of herself, hair tied up, shoes worn out, hands dry from sanitizers. They were from different worlds, whoever he was. Just as she started to consider leaving, the bell above the door jingled again. A man stepped in, shaking raindrops from his coat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an ease that spoke of quiet confidence. His dark hair was damp from the drizzle, his jaw clean-shaven, and his eyes, sharp but kind, swept across the cafe until they landed on her. He smiled. Emma, he asked, his voice deep and warm. She blinked, momentarily forgetting how to speak. Yes, you must be Nathan. He nodded, walking toward her with a small, polite smile. Sorry I'm late, the rain caught me off guard. It's okay, she said, gesturing toward the seat across from her. I just got here too. Nathan set down his umbrella and coat, settling across from her. He had an effortless presence, confident, but not arrogant. There was something gentle in his eyes, something that instantly made her feel less nervous. You look like you've had quite a day, he said, studying her kindly. She laughed lightly, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. That obvious, just a little, he admitted. Nurse, right, she blinked. How did you? The scrubs kind of give it away. Oh, she laughed again, embarrassed. Yeah, I just got off my shift. I didn't have time to change. I probably smell like antiseptic and exhaustion. Nathan smiled. I think you smell like someone who helps people for a living. Her cheeks warmed. She couldn't remember the last time anyone said something that sweet without it sounding forced. Do you like what you do? He asked. She thought about it. I do. Most days. It's hard, though. People think nurses just follow doctors around, but we're the ones who see everything. We hold hands when families can't. We clean up, comfort, listen, sometimes we even pray. Nathan listened intently, nodding. That sounds like a calling, not just a job. Emma looked down at her coffee. Maybe. But sometimes, it feels like the world forgets we're human too. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was a quiet understanding between them, two people from different worlds, both carrying invisible weights. "What about you?" she asked finally. "What do you do?" He hesitated, sipping his coffee before answering. "I work in business. A little bit of management, some operations. It's busy. Sounds important," she said, smiling politely. He chuckled softly. "Some days. Other days, it feels like I'm just running in circles." Emma relaxed, her earlier anxiety melting away. Their conversation flowed naturally. They laughed about childhood memories, his of getting lost in a grocery store, hers of pretending to be a doctor on her dolls. She told him how she used to sneak cookies from the hospital cafeteria, and he confessed that he once burned water while trying to make pasta. At one point, her hand brushed against his when she reached for her drink. They both froze, the air between them suddenly charged. "Sorry," she said quickly, pulling back. "Don't be," he murmured, smiling. "You have warm hands." She laughed nervously. "That's because I've been holding coffee." "Not exactly romantic." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But it's real." Emma didn't know why, but those words stayed with her. For the first time in months, she felt seen. Not as a tired nurse, not as a struggling daughter, but as a woman, someone worth talking to, worth listening to. Time slipped away unnoticed. When she finally checked her phone, it was past 4. "Oh no," she gasped. "I didn't realize how late it's gotten. I have to catch the 4:15 bus or I'll be walking home." Nathan smiled gently. "Then I'll walk you to the stop." "Oh, you don't have to." "I want to," he said simply, standing up. As they headed out, Emma reached into her bag. "I should pay for my drink," she said shyly. "I don't want to assume." He shook his head. "It's fine. This one's on me." She smiled faintly. "Actually, I already paid. It was my last $5, so, I guess it's on me this time." He stopped mid-step, glancing at her in surprise. "Your last $5? She laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, I probably shouldn't admit that, huh? It's okay, though. I get paid next week. I just wanted, I don't know, a nice afternoon." Nathan's heart tightened. She had spent the last of her money just to be here. Just to meet him. "You shouldn't have told me that," he said quietly. "Why not?" she asked. "Because now I feel like I owe you dinner." She smiled, tilting her head. "Then I guess you'll have to see me again." "Guess I will," he said, smiling. Back, outside, the rain had started again, a steady, gentle drizzle. Nathan opened his umbrella, then paused before handing it to her. "Take it," he said. "You'll need it more than I will." "But what about you?" He shrugged. "I'll manage. Consider it a loan. You can return it when we meet again." Emma's heart fluttered as she took it. "Deal." She waved as she stepped into the rain, the umbrella shielding her from the storm. Nathan watched her go, her figure disappearing down the street. Something about her lingered, her laugh, her honesty, the way she didn't care about appearances or pretense. He turned to leave, and as he did, the barista called out, "See you tomorrow, Mr. Carter. Want your usual espresso order?" Nathan smiled faintly. "Not today, Mia. I think I've had enough caffeine and surprises for one afternoon." If Emma had stayed a few moments longer, she would have realized the truth, that her kind, humble date wasn't just Nathan, the charming stranger. He was Nathan Carter, the founder and CEO of Maple Street Coffee, a man whose name appeared in business magazines and industry articles. But Nathan didn't want to be that man today. He wanted to be just Nathan. And for the first time in years, he'd met someone who made him forget the weight of his title, someone who spent her last $5 not for show, not for gain, but for the simple hope of connection. As he stepped out into the drizzle, rain soaking his shoulders, Nathan smiled to himself. He didn't know it yet, but this chance meeting would change both their lives, one rooted in humility, the other in privilege, bound together by something far more valuable than money. Something as simple and profound as the warmth of a cup of coffee shared between two lonely hearts. 3 weeks passed, and Emma had almost convinced herself that Nathan wasn't going to call. Every day after work, she'd glance at her phone between shifts, her heart sinking a little more each time the screen stayed dark. She tried to laugh it off when Lily teased her, saying, "Maybe he's just shy," but deep down, she knew how these stories usually went. Men like Nathan, polite, confident, too put together for someone like her, didn't usually stay. They appeared in your life like a beautiful dream, made you feel seen for a moment, and then vanished. Still, whenever she passed the Maple Street Café, she couldn't help slowing down, peeking through the windows as though fate might play a trick and bring him back to that same seat. She would imagine him there again, smiling, his dark hair slightly mussed from the rain, his voice warm as he teased her about the coffee foam. But he was never there. It was a Thursday evening when her phone finally buzzed. Emma was at the hospital break room, half asleep over a cup of vending machine coffee, when the notification lit up her screen. Nathan. Hi, Emma. I owe you dinner. Still free this weekend? Her heart jumped so suddenly she almost spilled her coffee. She reread the message 3 times just to make sure she wasn't imagining it. A smile slowly spread across her face, something that felt foreign after so many long, gray days. Emma. You remembered. I thought you forgot about me. Nathan. Impossible. Emma. Then yes. Dinner sounds nice. Nathan. Saturday at 7. I'll pick you up. By the time Saturday came, Emma's nerves were tangled in knots. She didn't own any fancy clothes, but after rummaging through her closet, she found a simple blue dress she hadn't worn in years. She ironed it carefully, brushed her hair into soft waves, and added a touch of lipstick, the same one she saved for special occasions. When Nathan arrived, she almost didn't recognize him at first. He wore a dark suit that looked effortlessly elegant, but what made her heart race was his smile. It was genuine, familiar, and it instantly made her forget every insecurity. You look beautiful, he said softly when she opened the door. She blushed. You clean up pretty well yourself. He laughed, offering his arm. Shall we? The restaurant he took her to was on a rooftop overlooking the city, a soft hum of music, fairy lights strung across wooden beams, and the skyline shimmering in the distance. Emma's breath caught in her throat. It was the kind of place she'd only seen in movies. You didn't have to do all this, she said quietly as they were seated. I wanted to, he replied simply. You deserve it. When the waiter brought menus, Emma's fingers froze. The prices made her heart race for the wrong reason. She'd never seen numbers like that next to food. Nathan noticed her hesitation. Don't worry about the menu, he said kindly. Order whatever you like. I'm not used to places like this, she admitted. Then we'll make it a new memory, he said with a smile. The tension slowly melted away as they talked. Nathan had a way of making her feel comfortable, even in a setting that screamed wealth and sophistication. They laughed about little things, like her inability to cook anything that didn't involve instant noodles, or his confession that he'd once set off a fire alarm trying to make popcorn. At one point, as she watched him talk, Emma realized something strange. The waiters greeted him by name. The manager personally checked on their table twice. It wasn't just politeness, it was familiarity. Nathan, she asked carefully, do you come here often? He paused, meeting her eyes with a thoughtful look. Sometimes, he said, it's one of my favorites. There was something in his tone, gentle, almost cautious, that made her let it go. Still, she couldn't help wondering. Dinner passed quickly. The view, the music, the laughter, all of it felt like something from another life. For the first time in years, Emma forgot about bills, exhaustion, and the constant hum of anxiety that followed her. She was just there, in that moment, with someone who made her feel like she mattered. When dessert came, Nathan grew quiet. He stirred his coffee slowly, as if gathering his thoughts. Then, finally, he said, Emma, can I tell you something? Her stomach tightened. That sounds serious. It might be, he said, smiling faintly. Do you remember the cafe where we met? Of course, she said, laughing. I think I'll always remember that day. I was so nervous I almost spilled my latte on you. His smile deepened. That cafe, I own it. Her laughter faded. Wait, what? I started Maple Street Coffee years ago, he explained calmly. It's my company. I built it from scratch, and now we have over 30 branches across the state. Emma stared at him, her mouth slightly open. You're the owner, he nodded, watching her reaction carefully. I didn't tell you that day, he continued, because I didn't want you to see me through what I have. I just wanted to talk to someone who didn't care about the name, or the money. Emma felt dizzy. The pieces fell into place, the baristas calling him, Mr. Carter, the way the staff treated him here, the ease with which he moved through spaces she didn't belong in. She leaned back in her chair, trying to process it all. So, when I said it was my last $5 that day. He smiled gently. You have no idea how much that meant to me. Her voice trembled. Nathan, I feel so stupid. I thought you were just normal, he said softly. That's exactly what I wanted you to think. And you treated me like I was. She blinked back tears. You must think I'm pathetic. Spending my last $5 on coffee when you could probably buy the whole cafe 10 times over. He shook his head, leaning closer. I think you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You spent your last $5 not to impress anyone, but just to show up. That says more about you than anything money could buy. For a moment, Emma couldn't speak. Her throat tightened, and tears welled up despite her efforts to hold them back. Nathan reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. You reminded me what real kindness looks like, Emma. I've met people who would pretend to like me for what I have. You didn't even know who I was, and you were still, you. She smiled weakly through her tears. I didn't do anything special. You did, he said firmly. You made me feel human again. The words hit her with an unexpected force. She saw it then. Behind the confident smile and expensive suit, Nathan carried a quiet loneliness too. He had everything money could buy, except someone who saw him for who he truly was. They talked for hours after that, their connection deepening with every story shared. Emma told him about her mother's illness, about the nights she spent holding strangers' hands so they wouldn't die alone. Nathan listened, eyes soft, his thumb gently tracing circles on the back of her hand. When he dropped her off at her apartment that night, the air was cool and quiet. They stood outside the gate, neither wanting to say goodbye. Thank you, she said softly. For tonight, for being honest, he smiled. Thank you for showing up. Again. Then, almost hesitantly, he leaned in and kissed her forehead. It was gentle, fleeting, but it carried a warmth that stayed with her long after he drove away. Days turned into weeks. Nathan started visiting her at the hospital, bringing her coffee and waiting outside when her shifts ran late. The nurses whispered about him, about the handsome man in the expensive car waiting for the tired night nurse. But Emma didn't care about the whispers. With him, life felt lighter. They would walk home together, laughing, sometimes stopping at small street stalls for cheap tacos or ice cream. Nathan loved that she didn't ask for more. She didn't want his wealth, just his presence. One evening, as autumn leaves began to fall, Emma returned to the Maple Street Café after work. The lights were dimmed, and soft music played. Confused, she stepped inside. The barista smiled mysteriously and handed her a small card. Emma opened it. Inside, written in Nathan's handwriting, were the words, "To the nurse who spent her last $5 on kindness, will you spend the rest of your tomorrows with me?" Her hands trembled. When she looked up, Nathan was standing at the very table where they'd first met, dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans. He dropped to one knee, holding a small velvet box. "Emma," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "you walked into my life on a rainy day and changed everything. You taught me that love isn't about grand gestures or wealth, it's about small acts of care, about being seen and accepted. You spent your last $5 on a cup of coffee, and I realized that was the best investment life ever made for me." So, he opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver ring, simple yet beautiful. "Will you marry me?" Tears spilled freely down Emma's cheeks. She covered her mouth, her heart pounding. The baristas peeked from behind the counter, grinning, phones in hand. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Nathan, of course I will." Cheers erupted around the cafe as Nathan slipped the ring on her finger. He pulled her close, holding her as if he'd found something he never wanted to lose again. Outside, rain began to fall just like that first day, tapping softly against the windows. Nathan grabbed an umbrella from the counter, the same one he had lent her, and opened it above them as they stepped into the night. "Full circle," Emma said with a teary laugh. "Full circle," he agreed, kissing her forehead. "Only this time, you're never walking into the rain alone again." And as they disappeared down Maple Street, two silhouettes under a single umbrella, the cafe lights glowed behind them like a promise that sometimes, love begins with nothing more than a $5 cup of coffee and the courage to hope again.